I think the idea of the sustainable value framework applies universally, and I don't say that lightly, right? Because one size fits all models often can have difficulty when it comes to cultural differences and local adaptation and so forth. But I think this model basically you can apply it anywhere, right? It applies to any company in any culture in any country anywhere, because it's really it's culturally agnostic, right? It needs to be adapted. It can be played out and implemented in different ways, right? But the four quadrants I would say are universal. So that, yeah, I think it absolutely applies. And we just had a little workshop here with Indian companies who were able to apply it pretty well. What's important is the kind of the underlying ideas. So I think what I've tried to do is just to create some baseline constructs, so that people can have a meaningful conversation about what sustainability really means in a business context, rather than looking for compliance, right? So it's not about compliance so much as being able to be talking about the same things. When you say sustainability, let's make sure we're talking about the same things. Well, I mean, if I compare just in my own mind where I think we were, say, 20 or 25 years ago to where things are now, it's pretty different, right? I mean, 25 years ago it was still contentious as to whether the idea of eco-efficiency really held up, right? There was still a debate as to whether eco-efficiency was sort of a new idea and it was gaining traction. But I'd say that eco-efficiency 25 years ago was where base of the pyramid is today. There was still a lot of debate. There were only a few examples where it was really working strongly. So if you compare then to now, eco-efficiency is, it's just assumed, right? I mean, there's no question, right? In fact, people are now saying that eco-efficiency is like the age of that is kind of past. We've already, for the companies that have been doing it for a while, they've already done, most of what they can do. The low-hanging fruit is gone, and they're on now to other things. So the piece that I wrote, maybe 15 years ago called Beyond Greening, that may have been, a little early, in terms of where companies were in terms of their progression, but that's partly the idea, right, is to maybe have a foretelling of what might be to come. And I actually think that the argument made in that piece in 1997, the time for that is now, right? That is actually now coming home to roost, so it's taken 15 years, but I think we've arrived. Well, it's certainly a buzzword, right? I mean, no one would dispute that sustainability is a buzzword. No one would dispute that a lot of companies kind of use it, at least in part, for PR, right? There's plenty of kind of corporate social responsibility PR projects out there. Projects that are being done primarily to, grace the corporate sustainability report pages, but that are not really kind of integral to the business. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that I think we've realized that the kind of the old framing of, we'll do some company and some community projects, and the foundation will fund some philanthropic events, and then we'll do pollution prevention and eco-efficiency in our facilities, which is perhaps where we were a decade or two ago. That's moved considerably, to the point now where, there's still kind of PR that happens for sure, right? Things that are being done primarily for PR value. But there's a whole lot more happening now that's real in terms of core business investment than there was 20 years ago. And there's a whole lot more that's real in terms of actual innovation, not just, reducing the emissions of the current business, but moving to next generation technology and fundamentally new business models. So I think things have changed a lot in the last 20 years. Yeah, there are a lot of startups they're being born that way, right? So the sustainable value framework is particularly useful to incumbent firms because it presumes that there's a base business that needs to go through kind of eco-efficiency, pollution prevention. But there are a lot of startup companies, including many right here in India, that leap directly to clean technology and base of the pyramid. That's the reason that the company exists, is to create a strategy to do that. I think of that as sustainable entrepreneurship, right? That's really what it is. And that also exists inside corporations, right? Corporations themselves are starting new entrepreneurial ventures that are born, sustainable, born clean tech and potentially inclusive, more inclusive. But then corporations also have their legacy businesses and, their existing core, which over time, is phased down. The transformation to sustainability in an existing large corporation is a process, right? So it's not kind of flicking the switch and then the next day you're sustainable, right? It's kind of a long-term transformation process. I think there are just a lot of vexing problems, right? That continue to plague us, and we all know what that list is composed of. It's composed of, malnutrition, hunger, lack of clean water and access to sanitation, a housing crisis, where people don't have adequate shelter, healthcare, which is non-existent, for many people throughout the world. I mean, it's the usual list of vexing problems that, we, until fairly recently, expected that, the government and the philanthropic sector would take on, because that was their assigned role. And not that it isn't, and not that they don't have an important role to play, but it seems to me that this whole notion about business and the base of the pyramid, what it's shown is that there is actually a role that the enterprise and business sector can play in innovating solutions to those vexing problems, and it can be done in a commercial way, often with the engagement of NGOs and government, because that's a good thing, but that you can tap into the power of entrepreneurship and enterprise to make this go a lot faster. So I think that's all good, right? That these problems have been around a long time. They haven't gone away. In some cases, they've gotten worse, right? And so the time is now for us to figure out how to really get after them. Are corporations doing enough to make the world sustainable? No, no. The typical corporation is, still, if it were an oil freighter, right, it would still be an oil freighter chugging in the wrong direction, just like the world is still chugging in the wrong direction. But I think we've at least slowed the oil freighter down and begun to change its course, right? So we've got maybe another decade or so to really turn it around. So no, we're not. I think we're still primarily focused on reducing the negative impact in the existing businesses that companies are in, and not nearly enough focused on inventing tomorrow's businesses that will fundamentally shift the game and serve a whole lot and include a whole lot more people. That's the big challenge and opportunity for the coming decade. One thing, I guess there are probably a couple of parameters. One, is that whatever the world looks like, we know that we have to live within the means that exist, defined by the underlying natural capital of the planet. Number one, right? There's no way around that. There are laws of physics and biology that if we continue to violate, we're going to pay for it. We're already paying for it. So that's number one, that we have to live within the means of the underlying natural capital and environment that we have, number one. Number two, we know that the world will never be everyone will never be totally equal, right? Because people are not all the same, and there's variation in capability and skill, and so people will never be totally equal, right? That's a pipe dream. There will always be variation. Some people will do better than others, right? And that's probably to be expected. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? So some people excel for a variety of reasons. Maybe natural endowment, maybe effort, maybe a combination of the two. That's what accounts for entrepreneurial success, along with luck, right? Is skill. But having said that, we know that the level of dispersion and inequality that exists throughout the world today is unsustainable, and it's getting worse. You know, there is such a thing as toxic inequality, and at some point levels of inequality reach the point where you just end up with chaos. You have social chaos and political meltdown on your hands, and that's not a pretty sight, and we don't want to trend much further in that direction. It's already happening in some parts of the world. So we know that we have to somehow close the gap. We have to make the world more equal than it is now without expecting this sort of utopian pipe dream that everyone will be equal, because of course they won't. Well, it's misinterpreting the message, number one, and it's taking a title which was not actually our original title, right? The original title of the article was Raising the Bottom of the Pyramid, Strategies for Sustainable Development, but the editor of the journal came up with that title, The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. And I was actually a little bit concerned that it would be interpreted exactly that way. But of course that was never the message, never has been, never will be, that anyone that just makes profits off the back of anybody, whether they're poor or not, doesn't have a sustainable business, right? That's an extractive business, and it's not going to last for very long. You may be able to get away with it for a while, but it's not going to last for very long. There's nothing, I would say there's nothing at all wrong with making a profit in a business that serves anyone well, right? Including the poor. But that means that the business actually has to serve the poor well. And then you have to ask the question, what does serving the poor well mean? And I think it means not only providing goods and services, it means providing a value proposition, including livelihood generation and productivity enhancement for people and communities in terms that make sense to them, right? So if the value proposition is compelling for poor people themselves, they'll buy, right? And they're willing to pay. And if they're willing to pay because they see a value proposition and the company is able to derive a healthy profit from doing that, I say more power to them, because it means the whole thing will turn a lot faster. It means that there's going to be more investment capital to make the business grow. It means you'll attract more investment, and it means you'll impact more people and communities faster.